Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Q&A and update. This is one for technically June 2023, though I did not answer any of the questions from the last month's Q&A, so I'll also be covering all of the questions from the May 2023 Q&A that I did. And I guess I should start off with the update portion of this. Basically, at the end of May, first week of June, a family member of mine got admitted to the hospital for something quite serious. And so I was with them in the hospital for the 2+ weeks that they were in there. And so couldn't work on anything, couldn't record the last Q&A, couldn't do much related to the channel at all. But they are out of the hospital, or at least out of the emergency care that they were in, and seem to be doing a lot better now. So I've been working on videos and getting everything done. But yeah, basically the last month has been pretty hectic. Obviously, I had about 2 weeks worth of stuff that I needed to catch up on. And now I'm working on a new video, another anime randomizer video, which actually has a sponsor this time. So the next video that'll be uploaded to the main channel has a sponsor that I'm working with, which if you don't know, means basically that it has a deadline. Sponsors usually like your videos to come out at a certain time because they run promotions that, you know, obviously are advertised in the video that are time sensitive. So the next video that'll be coming out will be the Anime Randomizer Part 3, which will be out sometime in the first week of June, no later than like June 10th, I don't think. Also, the Anime Randomizer Part 2, the one that I specifically did the Trigun Stampede review, is currently copyright claimed. It got a copyright claim from some Korean TV network that I have never heard of before that claimed a part of the video. I think specifically the Yatterman Night segment. But again, I don't know why it would be a Korean television network. That doesn't make any sense to me. So I submitted a dispute because obviously the video is fair use and should be fine. So currently the second part of the Anime Randomizer is just down. It's not even available on YouTube. It's blocked in like 99% of countries. And so I have made the Patreon version public so that anyone can watch it, just like this video. Don't even need a Patreon membership or anything. So if you're wondering where that video is, just watch it on Patreon for now. I'll post an update if I can get the copyright resolved and it can be public on YouTube again. But it's still got like 14 days left on the dispute because they give them 30 days to respond. So it could be another 2 weeks before that video. And I can't even trim out that part of the video while it's in the dispute process. They don't let you like make any other adjustments. So it's just down for like another 2 weeks, which really, really sucks. But that's about all the major updates. Like I said, I'm working on the Anime Randomizer Part 3. And then probably, so I'll do the Anime Randomizer Part 3. I'll do another video that'll be just a video that I want to make. And then after that, I'll probably post another poll where you guys can decide what video I make based on a list of video ideas that I have. Because that seemed to go really well last time. That's even how I made my shorter games with worse graphics video. And that video is doing very, very well right now. So I'm probably going to do something like that again. And that's about it as far as I can think of. Just working on more videos, working on more content, trying to get this Q&A and update. I'm recording this on the 29th, I believe. So I'm trying to get this edited and uploaded, hopefully on like the 1st of the month, I think would be good. And then other than that, I don't have a whole lot going on with the channel. It's just focusing on the main channel stuff, the main videos. But yeah, let's get into the Q&A portion. So starting with the Q&A from May, let me find the earliest comment. Max Goldstein asks, what's something you really want to try in a video that you're afraid to do? I don't have anything that I'm afraid to do in a video. I don't think there's anything that I'm like, that I wouldn't do. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I do have this Patreon now. And Patreon, especially Vimeo, where I host the videos that then get uploaded to Patreon, is like a-okay with like nudity and rated R content, as long as it's not like pornographic, which my videos obviously wouldn't be. So I can show like nudity in television shows. Even my the very first episode of the Anime Randomizer, I showed straight up nudity. There's like very little that I can't show. There's very little that I wouldn't want to talk about. I mean, I've made in-depth videos on like fan service and waifuism and sort of like sexuality in anime, which are pretty taboo topics usually. But there's nothing that I'm like afraid to cover. I'll talk about anything if I really have an interest in it, or I think that it would make a good video. So yeah. Fade asks, does pineapple go on pizza? I personally don't like pineapple on pizza. I've tried it a couple times. I don't have a visceral negative reaction like a lot of people have. I know a lot of people like really freak out. I think Hawaiian pizza is even a Canadian thing, or like was invented in Canada. I might be wrong on that, but I know a lot of people that really like pineapple on pizza, really like Hawaiian pizza, and I am just kind of okay with it. If it's like I'm at a party or something, or I'm out with friends and someone orders pizza, and for some reason the only one left is like a pineapple pizza, I'll eat it. Got no problem with it. Don't think it's that bad. I just don't seek it out. But I do like weird pizza. I like barbecue chicken pizza. That's like one of my favorites recently. As well, and this is specifically a pretty Canadian thing, donair pizza is like delicious. Rock's Blessing asks, what is the most thought-provoking concept you have seen in anime? Which is very deep. Thought-provoking concept, I don't even know. I mean, Ava is probably one of the most thought-provoking shows I've seen. I haven't gotten specifically into a lot of the like really cerebral shows that a lot of people hype up. Ava being the biggest one for me. I'll probably need to check out more shows that get a lot more in-depth and complex in order to answer that question properly, I think. Because nothing I can think of springs to mind. This is a question from Giant Purple Pen 15, my favorite username. What game ending left you the most dissatisfied? What game ending left you feeling the most satisfied? On the same note, which one game ending would you change and how? Game ending that left me the most satisfied and dissatisfied, and which one I would change. I know which one I would change, and it's the ending to Mass Effect 3. Mass Effect 3 right now for me is the most dissatisfying one, and one that I would change, because it's such a like cop-out. For those of you who don't know, Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3, this giant sci-fi RPG series that goes through this entire like chronicle of, it's basically like the entire Star Wars saga in like length and complexity, and with all these characters fighting to like save the universe. And the whole thing about it is that you kept making choices throughout, from the first game to the third game, and they would like carry over. And that was something I really, really loved that a lot of games haven't really done. Like you would save a colony in Mass Effect 1 that's like an entirely optional choice. You can choose to not even go to a mission there. You can choose to let them die. But then if you save them, they show up at like a Mass Effect 3 and like help you out in a mission. And so it like all carries over. But then the ending of Mass Effect 3 famously has this like Deus Ex Machina like MacGuffin device, which is kind of well set up in Mass Effect 3. That's like the only way we can stop the Reapers is this one device. And then you go to use the device, and the device has like an AI on board that makes you like pick 3 different colors. Like it's literally like red, green, and blue. And each of the colors corresponds to a different ending. And it's just a really weirdly binary, or I guess, I don't know, trinary choice for a series that up until this point has made you think that like all of your choices are going to matter into the end. And I think it's definitely a case of just they had no idea how they were going to end the series when they made even the first or the second game. And so I would definitely change that. I don't know if you could change just the ending of Mass Effect 3 and make it more satisfying. I think you would have to like go back and like edit Mass Effect 1 and 2 to like set up more parts of the ending of 3 and have it carry over more. And then even then, like people shit on the 3 choices that the game gives you and like how binary it is. But it's how would you possibly wrap up the entirety of this trilogy of like sci-fi games without just making it a choice at the end, right? Like how could you possibly, you'd have to set up like 15 different endings that all tie into your choices leading up to that point. And it feels like that would be like an insane amount of work to do. But if they pulled that off, then Mass Effect 3 would be like the best game ever, I feel. As for the most satisfying, oh god, I don't. Hotline Miami and Hotline Miami 2 are some of my favorite games of all time, specifically because of the crazy plot twists that they pull. and they're not that satisfying. Specifically, the ending of Hotline Miami 2 is like almost unsatisfying on purpose. But I can't think of many other games where I finished them and I was just blown away. Like when the credits are rolling on Hotline Miami 2, I was like actually like slack-jawed, like what did I just witness? That was insane. You cannot predict how that game is gonna end. It's absolute insanity. But they aren't satisfying, so I feel like that's not a proper answer. I don't know, it might be a cop-out, but like Metal Gear Solid 1, I feel has a really, really great ending. That game just has a really good, like, final sequence, I feel like. I'm trying to think of endings where I was like, oh, that was perfect, I'm good. Like, everything is fine, and I feel like this warm blanket of, like, I'm finished with the game now. But I feel like Hideo Kojima games are really good about, like, the final segment of the game that leads into the credits just being like, and everything's fine and happy, and we all lived happily ever after. And Snake gets to go live with his gay otaku boyfriend. Lazaroth asks, what is your favorite video that you've made? This answer changes a lot. I'm someone who, I know a lot of YouTubers like hate their old content, and there is some videos of mine that I cringe watching. I think pretty much everything before my fan service video is like, I just watch it and I was like experimenting with stuff. I'm standing in front of the green screen instead of sitting down on a couch. Like there's just a lot of really weird stuff going on that is a little cringy to watch, but the videos aren't bad. I just don't like hearing myself talk from that long ago. As for my favorite, it changes a lot. I think there's a lot of like pride that I have in every video I upload, or like I'll finish a video and be like, that's the best one I've ever made. And then some time will pass and I'll change my opinion on that. Like my Space Western video right now is very conclusive and very, it's everything encompassing my entire thoughts on the genre. And it's something I wanted to make for a really long time because I really like Space Westerns and just wanted to talk about them. And talking about the history of them in that way just felt very satisfying to me. My horror games video is probably, I would say, my best video, or the video that is the one that, if I were to show anyone just one video of mine, I'd probably show them the horror games video, which ironically is probably where most people know me from because it's my most viewed video. Just because that video is like it's like the perfect video essay type video for me. I really enjoy how I was able to like kind of tie everything in together into this simple premise of like, why do horror games stop being scary? And then I ended up making it this weird commentary on capitalism, which I enjoyed. And kind of continue to do with my shorter games video. And then my waifu video is like the most research I've ever put into anything in my life. That's a video that was just a lot of work and very conclusive into this phenomena, or like this idea of the waifu. So it is hard. I would say my horror games video, probably my best video, probably the video that I'm most proud of. And it's got the success to reflect that, which really makes me happy. There's a lot of people that are not happy at all with their most popular video, but I actually really enjoy mine. Even my fan service video, I'd be fine with being my most viewed video. Cleator, oh god, you left a hold on. You left a comment on how to pronounce your name on my last video. Hold on. Clytour. You left a comment, Clytour, on how to pronounce your name. I'm so sorry. Clytor asks, what is your take on video game difficulty? Do you feel there is a place for having multiple difficulties for different skill levels, or do you think games should take the From Software route of being one singular difficulty? Also, thank you for all the hard work you put into for this channel and the thoughts you put into the answers for these videos. Keep up the hard work. Thank you. I've wanted to make a video on video game difficulty for a while now. I think that I prefer one difficulty setting. The From Software route of just making the game for one difficulty and then balancing everything around that is, I think, ideal, because the problem that you run into with multiple difficulties is like, you only really develop for one. Most games only really make the game for one difficulty and then scale down and up on both sides. So normally when you're playing a game on either normal or maybe sometimes hard, that's like the intended difficulty. And then the other ones are just kind of offshoots for like people who want a harder or easier experience. And the offshoots are typically not thought of as much. It's either more health for all the enemies, more enemies to fight, less health for the hero. Like, it's very basic stats that just get adjusted, which can lead to it feeling weird. Like, a lot of the times if you play on easy difficulty for a lot of games, it's like a joke. Like, there's no challenge whatsoever. And then if you play on the hardest difficulty, it feels impossible because it's like, oh, you die in one hit, but the enemies take 1,000. And so I think one intended difficulty is the ideal way to do it for most games, especially if it's a longer game or like a From Software, like big RPG game, because I'm not going to want to like get halfway through the game and be like, oh, this is too hard for me. Let me adjust difficulty. I think if you're doing that, you've like failed in game design. Like, that shouldn't be the responsibility of the player to give themselves a balanced experience. And I think that a difficulty slider just sort of like offloads that responsibility to the player. So I would prefer that people just put one difficulty in, balance for that one difficulty, make it perfect. Because once you kind of tune into that balance, it's like the perfect playing experience. I commonly have the story where I played Sekiro, and for the first hour or two, I was just completely like getting my ass whipped by like random fodder enemies. And then the game clicked for me and I realized how you're supposed to play it. And then it was just enjoyable and easy and like, well, not easy. It was still very difficult, but like the game clicked with me and I didn't have much issue after that. And I was just able to kind of breeze through the rest of the game because I got what the game was going for and it felt satisfyingly difficult. However, there is a major problem with difficulty that is one that I think is getting talked about more recently, which is a good thing, which is accessibility. Basically this idea that like, I can play a game where I'm dodge rolling and having to use like a ton of reflex and hand-eye coordination and all of this stuff. And I can do that fairly well, but not everyone can. And some people have disabilities where they're not able to react to things as fastly, or they maybe even just have physical limitations to how they're able to play the game. So if you're making something like a FromSoft game that is very difficult for most people, you've got to think that someone who perhaps has some sort of handicap, it's even more difficult for them. And so that's where I think difficulty sliders can be a good thing, is that like, yeah, just some people are going to have more challenging experiences with games and there should be more accessibility so that they're able to finish it. The common thing that you hear with Dark Souls is that people just give up playing it because it was too hard for them. And that I think is also a failure of game design in a lot of games. Dark Souls perhaps has that sort of reputation, but there's so many other games where people give up because the game was too hard or it was like unintuitive. And that I think isn't a good thing. I think God of War Ragnarok actually did this very, very well. Where like, for example, there's a lot of sequences where you have to mash a button and there's just a setting that you can flip off where it's like, you don't have to mash a button anymore. You can just press the button and it works the same. So if someone has a handicap where they're not able to mash buttons as fast, they just don't have to. And I think that that was really good. However, it just still had the multiple difficulty options that I didn't really like. It should be more nuanced than that, I think is my final answer for this. Viking Robot Ninja asks, if you could take an all-access tour through any video game setting, like in the holodeck from Star Trek, which game would you choose? That's a tough one. Obviously, Cyberpunk is a big one. As much as I rip on Cyberpunk, and I have a whole video talking about how they lied about it, like the Cyberpunk setting is very cool to me. So something like Cyberpunk would be very enjoyable to just walk around like Night City. Like, that'd be sick. Obviously, Dark Souls and Elden Ring, I just enjoy the worlds of. They're very painterly and enjoyable. I think actually Sekiro would be the best one because that game is beautiful sometimes. Like walking around the palace area, that's like one of the final levels, would be so sick. That would be really, really cool. I guess even Final Fantasy VII. Having played Final Fantasy VII Remake, Midgard is just so fucking cool. I would love to walk around that like in real life. That'd be such a cool, I just want to live there. It's just a very cool environment. But yeah, I think number one choice is probably still just Cyberpunk 2077. There's very few games where I'm like, I just kind of want to live in this world. This is very cool looking. It's just kind of unfortunate that the game doesn't really deliver on that a lot of the time. But as a holodeck experience, I think it'd probably be one of the best ones. Okay, and that is all the questions for May, which was 2 months ago now. So now here is all the questions for June. So this is going to be a bit of a longer video. Justin Butcher asks, if you could switch two movie characters into each other's roles, who would they be? I have had the idea, and there's probably like fanfic or something that's done this already. It's probably an idea other people have had thus far. But I just love the idea of putting Ash from Evil Dead, or like specifically like Army of Darkness Ash, into literally any horror movie. I think they would make the horror movie better. It would be more fun. It would be more interesting to just swap him with like any horror final girl protagonist in any horror movie. And it's such a sad thing that the Evil Dead remained this sort of like B-level series and Bruce Campbell didn't blow up into like an A-lister. Because just thinking about like Ash versus Jason, Ash versus Freddy Krueger, Ash versus Pinhead or whatever, Ash on board the Nostromo against a xenomorph, the ship from what's the movie with Lawrence Fishburne, Ash on Event Horizon, and all this shit's happening and like a portal to hell's opening up and he's running around with a chainsaw arm. Like the Evil Dead is such a good franchise to me, specifically the Bruce Campbell ones, because Ash is a fun character, because he's like the anti-horror movie protagonist. Usually they're these scared final girl characters that are running around and eventually sort of become badass a lot of the time at the end of the movie. And Ash is that, but then going into like Army of Darkness or like the TV show that I've seen a couple of episodes of, Ash just doesn't give a shit anymore and he's just like murdering demons all the time. And so it's so funny to imagine him in any other horror setting where like Jason starts murdering camp counselors and Ash should just be like, oh, fucking this again. And he's like battling Jason with a chainsaw. That's just an idea I've had so much that I think would be really, really fun. Because you could put him into anything. Put him into like The Grudge, and he's the one who like, or the Ring, whichever one is the tape, and he's the one who gets it, and he has to like fight off Samara or like whoever the ghost girl is. Or he's in like what's the movie? It Follows, and he contracts like the sex STD virus that's like a demon that constantly follows you, and he's like fighting around with the monster while it's invisible to everyone, and he's going through like the goofy slapstick thing and like getting thrown around and stuff. Like that's just funny to me. And yeah, I would just put him in any horror movie. He works in all of them. There isn't a horror movie that you couldn't swap the protagonist of the horror movie with Ash Williams from Evil Dead and it wouldn't make the movie like 10 times better to me. Clytor asks, again, what do you often find to be the most valuable in a piece of media? To maybe be a little less vague, what sticks out to you when criticizing or generally enjoying a show, movie, video? A lot. I don't know. I try to, especially when I'm doing more review-based things, especially with like my anime randomizer, stuff where I'm like recommending things to people. I try to look at pieces of works holistically, where I'm looking at every aspect of them. I personally enjoy the visual behind the scenes of movies and anime and stuff like that. So I have an interest in like VFX. I have an interest in practical effects and special effects, or like stunt work and stuff like that. And even in the animation industry, I really like different forms of animation and different animators and how they do different shots. And that's always something that I've really, really liked. Just on my own, just kind of wondering like, oh, this effect is really cool. This shot is really cool. I wonder how they did that. And so whenever I'm watching something, that's usually one of the first things that sticks out to me is like the visuals of whatever I'm looking at, but also specifically like how they were done, just because I have like a really weird, nerdy interest in that. But when I'm actually like talking about like what makes something good or what makes something like valuable, really it's just the entire piece. And my rule of thumb that I've always had has been, the way that I review something specifically, if I were to like actually look at it critically, is what is it trying to accomplish? What is this work trying to accomplish? And how well does it accomplish that? And I think if you look at literally anything from that point of view, you can be a good critic and you can be someone who like more well understands whatever piece of media that you're looking at. So for example, like if I look at a movie like The Dark Knight with Christopher Nolan, or The Dark Knight Rises, which I think got torn apart for like weird plot holes and stuff, I don't care about the plot holes in like a Christopher Nolan movie, because that's not why I watch his movies. I watch them because they're visual spectacles. I watch them because they have tons of tension and they have really, really good action set pieces and have the most bombastic plots ever. And if there's plot holes or things don't quite make sense, I don't care, because that's not what they're trying to achieve. Like even Inception or Tenet isn't trying to be this like super tightly packed, like, oh, this is how dreams work, this is how time travel works. It's just trying to be like a fun action movie that like blows your mind. And if it can accomplish that, even if later I'm going, well, wait a minute, the scene where he's fighting himself from the future where they're reversed in time doesn't make any sense, why would he fight him again? I don't care about that, because the first time I saw a scene where a dude is fighting himself from the future, but the future version of himself is reversed in time, I thought that was the coolest shit in the universe. And so like, that's all I care about is like, what is it trying to achieve? Does it achieve that? If it does, it's a good movie, TV show, even like piece of music or writing. And if it fails to do what it specifically achieved or what it specifically sets out to do, that's when I think something doesn't quite work or like is bad or unenjoyable to me. Obviously, criticism at the end of the day is subjective, but like that to me is like the best way to look at it. And so that's just kind of how I think about things. There's nothing that I specifically look at one thing over the other. I maybe tend to focus on visuals or tend to focus on writings and like themes, just because that's what I personally have an interest in. But I think even if a movie's like doesn't have good visuals and doesn't have like maybe the best writing, if that's not what it's going for, it can still be like very valuable to me. James Robbins asks, if you had to unironically use a pickup line in real life, what would it be? I wouldn't use a pickup line in real life. I don't think pickup lines have been a thing since like 2007. It's not good to use pickup lines. Maybe if it's very corny, but even then, the whole point of a pickup line is that it's like someone you're just meeting for the first time. I would not want that to be someone's first impression of me, is using a pre-made pickup line. That would be terrible. That seems like a really bad idea, especially in this day and age. And I think the biggest thing about dating, even if you're one of those people who's like, I go out to the bar and meet a new girl every week, or I'm trying to like talk to as many people as possible, the best thing you can do is just be honest and like yourself. And a pickup line inherently isn't that, so that's why they fail. But yeah, just don't use pickup lines. They're weird and cringy. Just if you really are like that desperate to like meet people, just be yourself and go say hi to them. And for most people, that will work. Giant Purple Pen 15 asks, again, do you think we'll ever be able to return to the days where publishers are willing to invest in AA games? Seems like the industry solely relies on the indie development scene to fill that niche now, because publishers mostly focus on making big investment returns for shareholders and paying CEOs way too much money over making fun games. So yeah, that is something that is interesting, because I think the AA game, which was always like a weirdly defined type of game, because it was essentially just like the negative space between indie and AAA. Like you would only define a AA game as being, well, it's not indie and it's not AAA, so it's in the middle somewhere. But that is something that has been more prominent, has been like the AAA, gaming as a whole has gotten infinitely bigger than it was a decade ago. And a decade ago, it was infinitely bigger than it was 2 decades ago. It just keeps growing massively to the point where now AAA studios are infinitely bigger and more studio-like, more corporate than they were 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And the indie industry has also grown to the point where there's like a lot of indie games that are entire teams of people making them, and entire like gigantic, like they're basically AAA games from 20 years ago. Just we call them indie now because they're not owned by like EA. And the whole space has gotten like way more divided, where now when we think of indie games, we think of like the one-man game, because that's what it was 20 years ago. That's what like Doom was. It was 2 guys, 2 dudes making games, and they made one of the biggest games of all time. And obviously there's more than 2 people that worked on Doom, but like you think of John Carmack, John Romero, and we tend to either hold up like the indie game as in made by 1 dude, or AAA games as in made by 10,000 employees. And like the space in between is like incredibly nebulous. And like, I think that that's sort of like convergence of like indie, AAA, and then like the games that are indie games but still big, and the games that are AAA games but still small, sort of like closing in. I think that, especially when I talk about in my latest video of like, I want shorter games with worse graphics, that is how you achieve that, is either by AAA studios like just cutting the fluff and going, instead of spending 6 years making this masterpiece of a 150-hour long game that looks more real than real life. Why don't we just spend like a year making a game, right? And just make it good and make it smaller. Or an indie studio being like, let's step up, increase production, get some employees under our belt, and make something that can like compete with the AAA space. I wish at least someone would experiment with that and the idea of like just making a ton of smaller games as opposed to like big ones. But I think really you just need to see more examples of that coming out and support that in order for it to like really take off. Because right now that doing something like that would be an experiment, and a lot of companies are just afraid to be like the first to do it, I feel, is where we're at right now. Cooper asks, what makes an anime memorable to you? I think looking back on a lot of the anime that is the most memorable, that have stuck in my head a lot, I think very strong themes and messages and plot points that stick out is obviously a big one. A lot of people remember End of Eva. A lot of people remember the twist in Steins Gate. A lot of people remember the big ass fight scene in Gurren Lagann. A lot of people remember the Spike Spiegel doing the like finger gun thing in Cowboy Bebop. Like big moments like that kind of just like encapsulate the whole show are obviously the easiest to remember. For me, a lot of anime that I really enjoyed that specifically have stuck with me have been ones that have like sold me on a message or a theme, where it's almost like even if you forget the show, you can still remember the lesson that it taught you. And that's why I talk so much about Eva. That's why I talk so much about Gurren Lagann and even Steins Gate to an extent. And that's why they're my favorite shows, is because like I don't have to think about just like, oh, Eva or like Shinji being sad, but I can think about like depression in general, or like my struggle with mental health, and remember the lessons that they have taught me. And now I'm thinking about Ava. Now I'm thinking about this, right? Like the Gurren Lagann thing, you know, you don't have to believe in yourself, believe in the me that believes in you, is such a powerful message if you like take it to heart. And I think that I've tried to like apply that to my life in a way, in a sort of self-improvement sense. And that's what's stuck with me. Like that's what makes something memorable, is when it can kind of live on outside the walls of its medium, if that makes any sense. There's tons of books where like, I don't maybe remember the plot of the book the best or the characters the best, but I remember the lesson that it taught me because it still teaches me. It still like keeps with me to this day. And that's sort of my thoughts on that, I guess. Travis Shank says, hey Alex, pretty short and sweet question, but I wanted to know what your favorite manga is. I don't know if you read a lot of manga, but I know you mentioned it in the past like Chainsaw Man, and I was just curious if you had a favorite. Love the vids, keep up the amazing work. Thank you. I don't read a lot of manga. I've been wanting to get into it more. Something I've thought about recently is just like time management, I guess. There's so many things that I want to do, but to do them would be hours of my day every day that I would need to put in, right? Like it's like, oh, I'd like to make music one day or something like that. Or I'd like to learn to draw. I bought a drawing tablet to try and learn how to like draw and animate and stuff. But it's like, in order to learn and get good at drawing, you need to put in several hours a day, every day for years to get to a point where it's like, it's going to pay off for you. And specifically that, and entertainment things like watching anime or TV shows. It's like you need to basically dedicate a portion of your day to like doing that in order to keep up with everything. And I just have not been good at that. And manga specifically is something that I have not fit into my schedule. So my favorite manga is Chainsaw Man currently. It's one of the only ones that I've kept up to or finished at all. And my manga selection is very limited. There's so many that I've started and maybe fallen off of, or just don't remember, because it was just like I read through them and didn't really care all that much. I want to get into it more. I just need to like find the time, and that's been something I've been wanting to do a lot more recently, has been like finding time to do extra stuff. So manga is definitely something. I have a gigantic list of manga that I need to get into, and so many people have recommended me so many good ones. I just need to actually like dedicate some amount of my time to it, which is the hard part. But Chainsaw Man's currently my favorite. It's so good. Just read Chainsaw Man and go watch the anime and go watch my video on it and everything. Like, consume Chainsaw Man content. It's amazing. It changed my life. It's so good. Kidney Vendor, which is a very ominous username, asks, have you ever considered making more Patreon tiers? Which is what a poetic way to end the video on my Q&A and updates for May and June 2023. I have not considered adding more Patreon tiers. I have not thought about increasing the price of my Patreon or doing a lot with it. My general thoughts have just been that, like, there are a lot of Patreons out there where I look at their content and I really enjoy it, and then they say, oh, this video is Patreon exclusive. You can only watch it for the $5 a month tier. And that almost turns me off. I don't like that, because I've been in a situation where I can't afford that. Like, people don't have disposable income at the ready. There are probably a ton of people watching my stuff that wouldn't even want to spend the $1 a month on a Patreon subscription because they just don't have disposable income. Like, it's too much to even consider spending anything. And I don't want any of them to miss major content. So I want all of my videos on YouTube are just free. You can just watch them. You don't have to pay anything. You don't have to be a member. You don't have to do anything. And I want everything that I make to be that way, including stuff on the Patreon. Like, whenever I do something like this, a Q&A and update that's like a Patreon exclusive, these are free in public, right? These aren't just patron only. It's patron only to ask the question, because I figure that that's a good limiter, but like the actual content isn't. And even when my anime randomizer video got copyright claimed, I made the Patreon version public because I just want there always to be that ability to watch everything I make freely and available without any restrictions. I hate to this day that Patreon makes it so difficult to make a pay what you want option. I don't know why that's not a thing. If it is, they haven't told me or let me do it. Patreon like makes it really difficult. You have to like subscribe for $1 a month and then go to your settings and go to like the payment setting and then change the value to like $5 or however much you want to spend more. It doesn't just let you do it automatically or like have a pay what you want option. And that's ideally what I'd want to have. So it's like as much money as you can part with, or as much as you want to give me, or as much as you think I'm worth, you can. But there's no limiting factor. Like I'm not asking people for $5 a month, but if you have $5 a month and that you think like, I don't need this, there's nothing better I would spend this money on, then that's what you can give. And that's sort of been my idea with it, is like make it as cheap as possible. And then also make everything that I put on the Patreon or like behind a paywall, bonus content, updates, behind the scenes, just general like behind the curtain sort of stuff where you're not missing out on main videos. Even the Patreon versions that I upload are just supplementary to the main videos that are up on YouTube already. And if they for some reason go down on YouTube, the Patreon version becomes public immediately. And so it's always available and always free for all of the main stuff that I make. And I wouldn't want to, just paywall anything major. I just don't like, it just doesn't sit right with me. But I think if I ever got to a point where I made enough money to like live on Patreon, I would just make everything available on it public. So you don't even need a membership anymore. And it just becomes like a tip jar support, pay what you want kind of thing. That's essentially my idea for it. So yeah, never considered making other tiers, never considered making other anything for this. And that's it. That's sort of it. So yeah, I don't know. Long talk about the Patreon, about my plans for it and my ideas about it. But that was the final question for the Q&A. So thanks everyone for watching. I will upload the next month's Q&A, hopefully actually on time for once. And you'll be getting a new video, an anime randomizer video out sometime in the next week and a half. So thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.